Hi, everybody. Believe it or not, we're back with another Bible Q&A. I'm Pastor Paul. I'm here with my wife, Sue, and we're back to answer some more of your Bible questions. So what do we have?
Well, the first question we have is from someone who wrote on our video way back in November when we
Okay.
talked about all personal questions.
Oh, yeah.
And Sam said, if I knew about this, I would have asked about your decision to homeschool your kids. How did it come about? What was it like, Sue? What were some of the challenges you faced and what were the benefits?
Well, we can talk a little about this right now, but I don't want to talk much, and here's why. We're going to do, I decided, a special
Mm,
podcast which we are going to dedicate to just explaining our experience with homeschooling.
sure.
Um, just to let everybody know, we homeschool. Well, we have 4 kids,
Mhm.
and we homeschooled all 4 of them, all the way from kindergarten through graduation. And we do want to talk about the things we did, and honestly, I think the benefits were fantastic. A lot of changes took place in the homeschooling realm during the years that we were
Mhm.
homeschooling. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, for sure.
And I mean, as far as its popularity, its acceptability, and that sort of thing, because we started in about 1989,
9-ish.
something,
Yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
Anyway, so we are going to talk about it, but we're going to do a whole podcast, and I'm going to let you talk about your what 26 years of homeschooling our kids.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good topic because, as we have said before, there's very few topics that touch the heart of parents as much as how they're going to educate their kids.
Oh,
Very
absolutely.
complicated decisions
Yes, it is very
involved.
complicated. And I think there's a lot of people, well, I know there's a lot of people who, when talking about homeschooling, they just become completely overwhelmed. They believe in
Yeah.
their hearts that they just can't do it. There's just no way
Mhm.
they can do it. And so I'm excited about the upcoming podcast where we will talk about just homeschooling. So,
Great.
yeah.
All right, so we'll move on to Alma. She says, I'm writing to ask for your guidance on how I should go about reading the Bible from beginning to end and how to stay consistent with this goal. I would greatly appreciate your guidance.
I get so many questions from people wanting to know what order to do the books of the Bible in as
Mm.
they decide, to go through the whole Bible. And honestly, I don't really like to dictate. I don't think it needs to be dictated
It's
necessarily.
almost like asking, "What should I prepare for dinner tonight?"
Yeah, what's
Because
your
there's so
taste?
many different tastes, there's so
Yeah.
many different, elements that go into
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's for sure. Now, there are some books that would probably be good to go together just because there's a continuing story. I usually tell people, okay, take the first 5 books of the Old Testament and
Mhm,
link them together. And
mhm.
don't if you are going to break them up, don't put a whole lot of time between those books because that is really largely a continuing story.
Well, but also once you get to Joshua,
Yeah.
Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, the story continues.
And that's
And this
another
the same
area.
thing can be said for when you get to the prophets. If you read through all of the major and minor prophets all at one time, whew, that's a lot of weight.
It is, and in that case, the chronology is gonna bounce around
Sure.
all over the place,
Mhm.
and in my teachings, I explain, where those chronologies,
Yeah.
begin and end. But, as far as the New Testament goes, I tell people, don't worry about really a book order.
Mhm.
Break up maybe the gospel. Start with Matthew and then
Yeah.
jump into Acts, Romans, maybe do 1st and 2nd Corinthians, then come back and do Mark, and
Mhm.
then pick up another 3 to 4 New Testament
Yeah.
books, then come back and do Luke, that sort of thing. Other than that, I don't think that doing things in Bible book order is as critical as people would like to think.
And a lot of Bible reading plans, a lot of very popular plans, and people seem to love this, is you read a little bit in the Old Testament, a little bit in the New Testament, and a psalm or proverb. For
Yeah,
me, that's just not the way I want to immerse myself
yeah.
in one thing at a time. Read an entire book in the Old Testament, an entire book in the New Testament, but we're all so different.
We are. Now, the second part of her question was how can I be consistent in
Mm,
that sort of a thing?
yeah.
And that really gets into some personal sort of creating good habit sort of stuff. And there are this differs from person to person to person based on just how consistent of an individual you are. I will say this, if you're not a very structured or disciplined person,
Mhm.
I think that doing it with someone or having someone that maybe you will report to
Yeah.
as they're also studying the through the Bible, and that that those meetings are going to be coming up, that's a good way to stay consistent if there's some accountability.
Right.
Maybe ask someone that hey, would you be willing to go through the Bible with me?
Mhm.
And we'll talk once a week, um, and talk about how we did that
Yeah.
week in our study. Talk about what we learned. That can be a good way to stay on course. But
Mhm.
that doesn't work for everybody. So it really kind of depends on your own personal habits and styles.
Right.
Yeah.
Trent says, I have a question when it comes to prayer. I heard from someone in my former church that by praying in your head and not voicing it, it means Satan can't hear you. Is this true? Doesn't Satan also hear our thoughts and play with our minds?
Well, he can certainly play with our minds, but there is nothing, not one word in the Bible to suggest that Satan can read our thoughts. Okay.
Mhm.
So, and is Satan even listening when we're praying? If you're praying out loud, Jesus
Mm.
prayed out loud and didn't seem to have a problem with it.
Mhm.
A lot of other people in the Bible did as well. I struggle with the idea that we need to pray in quietly in our own mind so as to keep the devil out of the conversation. I struggle with that. I got
Mhm.
to be honest with you. But if you feel sensitive about it, then by all means, pray in the quiet of your own heart and mind. But again, there's nothing in the Bible that would suggest Satan can read our thoughts at all. Now, he can certainly exploit what he knows to be common human thoughts,
Sure.
but I don't think he knows our thoughts, sees our thoughts, or can hear our thoughts. He knows humanity. He
Sure.
knows human psychology, and he can use that against us.
That's why I love how Martin Luther in his song called him our ancient foe.
Yeah.
He's been at this for a
He's
long
been doing this a
time
long
and he
time, and
knows
we
the
haven't.
probabilities. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, when you are teaching and you mention that Satan is not omnipresent,
Right.
don't ascribe an attribute of God
Right.
to Satan. I've heard people go, yeah, right, like
That
it
it's
it
kind of like a
just
light bulb goes off.
yes,
Yeah.
because there's something that kind of maybe ebbs in a little bit to say they're just the good and the bad and they're equal. No,
Yeah.
no, 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 they're
No,
not. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Isaac says, if we sin in secret or keep repeating the same sin, do our prayers become less effective? Does God stop hearing our prayers?
What I hear Isaac's asking is what I hear a lot of people asking. And that is, if I can put words in his mouth for a moment, or maybe in the mouths of many others who've written, they write to me very often and say, Pastor Paul, there's an area of my life that I keep falling to. And I'm afraid that because of how many times in a given
Mm.
month, for example, that I fall to this sin, that God is going to stop loving me. He's going to stop listening to me. And that it's going to come a point where my prayers are just nothing. He's going to disconnect the communication,
Yeah.
right? That's what I often hear.
Hmm.
That's what I kind of hear going on here.
Sure.
And I want to say, listen, I don't care how many times you sin in a month or a week or a day.
Hmm.
You come to the Lord. You come to the Lord quickly, and don't let a callus grow over your conscience and your heart. You come to the Lord quickly and you say, Lord, I know you're sick of and tired of hearing from me about this, which he's really not.
No, we get sick and
We're sick and
tired
tired of
of
going. Yeah, right.
confessing. Yeah.
But you say, Lord, forgive me, cleanse me, and change me. And I'm here to tell you, your relationship with the Lord will stay strong.
Hmm.
And you don't need to worry about the enemy whispering in your ear, telling you you've sinned so much that he's about ready to dump you altogether.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Good encouragement. I like that. Sue says in 1 Corinthians 6:3, Paul says, "Do you not know you will judge angels?" Never heard that before. So if we are to judge angels, when will that happen?
Well, I can tell that Sue hasn't listened to my most recent First Corinthians study because we just recently, just a few weeks ago, covered that.
Sure.
And I talk about that. And I talk about the fact that that really isn't something that we hear about elsewhere in the scripture. Paul talks about it. He's talking about it in relation to the people in Corinth going to human judges to
Mhm.
settle their issues. And he's saying, you know what, guys, we're going to judge angels one day. And so you don't have anybody around that's competent enough to take care of your issues. And
Mhm.
that's the whole reason he
Yeah.
made the statement. So when is that going to happen? Well, we assume at the judgment when all things are kind of being judged
Mhm.
in the final days. It'll probably go along around with the white throne judgment we expect. We're not told specifically is I guess, the best short
Sure.
answer, but we assume this is going to happen when the final judgment takes place.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
just love it when people say, "I've never heard that before."
Yeah, I
It's
know.
great.
Yeah.
Shelley said, "Could you clarify how David is a man after God's own heart? That's a hard sell, given that he had multiple wives, was an adulterer, and complicit in a murder plot."
I know. And so people hear that God says David is a man after my own heart, and then they read about him in the Bible and they're
Uh-huh.
like, "Hmm, really?
Yeah.
He was a man," because they interpret it as a pure and sinless,
Mhm.
or as maybe as good as you can get
Yeah.
this side of heaven. And that's not what that term means. To say, when God says he's a man after my own heart, he's a man who sought after the heart of the Lord. He yearned for the heart of the Lord. He wrote about it in the Psalms,
Mhm.
and his heart was also easily broken when the conviction of the Lord was laid upon him. And I believe that's another element of why God called him a man after my own heart.
Mhm.
Think about it. Saul, his predecessor, was a man who, when convicted, made all kinds of excuses
Right.
and just simply hardened his heart further. David didn't do that. When
Mhm.
David was convicted of sin, he broke. He broke and he said, "You're right. I'm guilty."
Mhm.
And uh, that's something God loves. God will not despise a broken and contrite heart.
Mhm. That's
So,
awesome. Shar says, "I have been doing a reading plan through the Bible with two of my teenage granddaughters,
hmm,
and we're currently making our way through Exodus. The devotional has explained that there is a direct correlation between the tabernacle and the Garden of Eden, meaning that the tabernacle was patterned after Eden. Also, in today's devotional instruction, they referred to Adam as being the first priest. I've never heard these teachings before, and I'm not sure they are biblically sound."
yeah, I'm really not sure they are either. That's the problem with devotionals. And I try to encourage people, well, first of all, be careful. Be
Mhm.
careful about consuming devotionals because it's kind of like eating candy. Because devotionals are geared toward creating kind of a warm fuzzy or a connection point, a handle with every Bible passage that you kind of come across. And sometimes it's really hard to do that. And sometimes devotionals have to reach to make that connection, that heart connection. And so be careful. Make sure if you're going to read a devotional, it's like dessert, but make sure you got your dinner before, and
Mhm.
don't just eat dessert, you know, um, and make sure the devotional is written from someone that you really respect, that sticks to the word,
Yeah.
and make sure that what you're reading you check. That's why I appreciate here what this person is doing. Shar, she's writing because she wants to check on this. I've never heard that the tabernacle was a pattern of Eden.
Mhm.
I've never heard that. I don't know where the writer of that devotional got that.
Mhm.
I'd love to find out. But honestly, I've never heard that. And then she says that Adam was referred to as the first priest. Um, you know, that could be applied to a lot of people in a lot of circumstances
Yeah.
because the function of a priest is to essentially intercede and to go before the Lord on someone else's behalf.
Sure.
And, you could say that Adam did that in some respect, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure where, but you could apply that word to a lot of different people. And I didn't read the devotional, so I really can't
Yeah.
comment on it. So I'll just give a more general response and say, um, check up on your devotionals and make sure they're telling you what's really in the Bible. And if they're
Mhm.
not, find a different devotional or get rid of your devotional altogether and
Mhm.
just read the Bible, study the Bible, read a good commentary.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, my teachings are kind of commentaries.
Right.
And then there are other excellent commentaries as well. If that's something
Mhm.
you want to do to give some greater clarity and insight, but be careful about devotionals.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Melissa says, I'm a believing wife and mother to an unsaved husband and teenagers.
Mm,
I love them dearly. I pray for them daily, but I often find myself caught in a whirlwind of fear and panic
yeah.
when I see how the world is gripping them. How do I cling to God's promises and break out of this fear cycle when I see my kids gravitating toward the world?
Yeah, my heart goes out to women like Melissa. She says she has an unsaved husband. She's got teenagers who are being
Mhm.
influenced by the world. She's praying for them, but she's struggling sometimes to hold on to faith. And
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to.
Right.
So, Melissa, if you're listening, when you say that there are times when these whirlwinds of fear and panic come upon you, that is
Mhm.
unbelief. Let's doubt, okay? And
Mhm.
we need to call it what it is. And she needs to recognize it so that she can deal with it. And she needs to bring that to the Lord.
Mhm.
And she needs to just tell the Lord, Lord,
Yeah.
I'm praying for my family. I'm praying for my husband, for my kids. But what I see with my eyes has me in a tailspin sometimes. And so I need your grace and I
Mhm.
need your strength to hold fast to faith and to trust and to put my hope in you that you have not abandoned my family, regardless
Mhm.
of what I see with my eyes, right? And, we're told over and over in the word that we're not to fix our eyes on what is seen, but what is unseen.
Yeah.
Because, frankly, if you do fixate on what is seen, you're going to struggle with depression, doubt, and unbelief.
Mhm.
So it really comes down to what I'm looking at in front of my eyes. Well, she can't help but see what she's seeing.
Sure.
So she's got to bring what she's seeing before the Lord,
Mhm.
and she has to confess to him that this is causing a struggle in her heart. Listen, God already knows you're struggling.
Mhm.
God already knows you're having a hard time. He wants you to bring that burden to him. He wants you to offload it at his feet,
Mhm.
and he wants you to receive a supernatural work from his hand of grace and faith to stand strong. And perhaps as a woman and as a mother, you might have some additional
Well,
exhortations.
and I think we are very relational as women. And so I think to seek out, pray about first, but seek out a relationship where she can be praying together
Oh, that's
with
good.
someone else, either a mentor relationship
Yep.
or another peer, another unsaved or mother who has unsaved household
Yeah.
that you probably don't need 15 friends, you just need like one
Yeah.
that you really can know that someone else is safe
Yeah.
to share these kind of words with,
Yeah.
and to pray together, and there's groups all over the place,
Yeah.
moms in prayer, moms in touch, things like that. So I
Yeah.
think to pray about that sort of thing. And then
Yeah.
to focus on what you said, the important part is our own personal relationship, the disciplines that go along with that. There are disciplines that go along with keeping our faith strong.
Yeah.
And they're all the normal Christian disciplines of being in the Word,
Yeah.
if it is possible to be in church, to
Yep.
be encouraged, or at least to be listening to good, sound Bible teaching,
Yep.
and to pray. And yeah.
Absolutely. Great suggestions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Ken said, I would like to ask about the laying on of hands. I realize there are times the Bible mentions it, but when others tell me of a struggle they're having in a spiritual sense or health issue, I ask if they would like prayer, and at times I lay my hands on them. I'm wondering if I may be overstepping my bounds regarding the laying on of hands and what the verse in 1 Timothy 5:22 means.
Well, if you're concerned about whether you're overstepping, then just ask the person, "Do you mind if I just lay my hand on you while I pray?" And
Yeah.
if they say, I'd rather you not,
Yeah.
then don't,
Yeah.
right? Because there's nothing supernatural about that particularly. It
Sure.
is a biblical thing, and it's
Mhm.
good. And I lay hands on people usually, but
Mhm.
if you're concerned about overstepping,
Mhm.
then just ask the person. Now he goes on to ask what the passage in 1 Timothy 5:22 means, if anything related to this. And 1 Timothy 5:22 is where Paul is exhorting Timothy not to lay hands too quickly, but he's
Mm.
talking about ordaining people for service.
Right.
And what he's saying is, don't raise up someone too
Mhm.
fast, because that can be a problem if they're not really mature enough for the rigors of leadership.
Mhm.
And so 1 Timothy 5:22 really doesn't apply
So are
at
you
all.
saying in that passage, the laying on of hands is almost like a conveying of authority,
In
imparting
in
an
in First
authority
Timothy
for
5:22
ministry?
it is. Yeah.
Yes, right.
It's really kind of a euphemism
Sure.
for ordaining and
Mhm.
extending, yeah, authority to people.
Mhm.
So, um yeah, just ask the people you're praying for.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. That's it. That's
Oh,
that's the
that's it.
end for
That's the
today.
last question.
Yeah,
Wow, that went pretty
it
fast.
did.
Yeah. Well, hey, be looking
Mm.
forward to the podcast that we talked about at the outset of this, where we're going to talk about homeschooling, and we're really just going to share homeschooling from the perspective of here's what we did, and
Mhm.
here's how our kids responded, and here's how they turned out. And we're going to let you kind of make your own decisions, but we're going to be talking about that very soon. So stay tuned. Until we see you again, God bless you. Have a good week, and we'll hopefully talk soon. Bye bye.